A while back, I started hearing and reading about this thing called the Konmari method. And the more I heard about it, the more I thought, wow, this really parallels a lot of things that I strive for in my production and mixing process. And I thought, hey, it might be interesting to talk about those parallels. So I thought, well, I should actually read it. There's a show on Netflix as well, which I've never seen, but I finally got around to reading this book by, I think I'm pronouncing this correctly, Kondo, and her book, The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up. And if you look behind me, you'll see that doesn't apply so much to my studio space, but the two key principles of this method really do have a lot of parallels on how I try and approach making records. And for me, the most important thing is she talks a lot about we've got too much stuff. And the approach to this is to get all the stuff in your house and throw it in a big pile and go through it piece by piece, all in one big fell swoop, and ask yourself one big question. Does this spark joy? Does this spark joy? And, in her thing is whether it's your high school varsity jacket or a book or a piece of jewelry, when you pick this up, does it spark joy? Doesn't go, oh yeah, that reminds me of this, but does it truly spark joy? And then to basically, at the end of it, every piece of clothing you keep and every jewelry, every old letter, are these things that genuinely spark joy? And if they don't, you should get them out of your house. I try and approach mixing a record and producing a record that same way. It's so common in our lives with unlimited multi-tracks to just go, oh yeah, just kind of throw a synth pad on there, we'll see. And I don't know, yeah, just put another guitar layer, I guess it'd be cool to have it. And we end up with these records full of things that are like, I guess it's okay to have that. Versus a different approach to looking at records in terms of, do these elements spark joy? If you go back to something all the way back to like Sgt. Pepper's, everything on there sparks joy. Again, if you love it, but everything has a place. Everything brings something to the party. Whether it's that or early Van Halen record or Pink Floyd or even, great Pearl Jam record. There's not a lot of stuff on there that's just like, I guess maybe it's there. It's all stuff that brings joy, that brings power and emotion and really conveys the story and the emotion in that. So one of the things I try and really hard to do is when I'm producing a record to really think, hey, we're going to find a guitar part, we're going to find a new keyboard sound, we're going to find all these elements, and kind of ask yourself, does this spark joy? Do I push up that fader and go, oh yes, yes, it's so cool that we put that guitar in there. Like, oh, it's so cool that we modulated the keyboard that way. And I try and do the same thing when I'm mixing. Sometimes a record will show up and there's literally like 80 tracks of overdubs. And you put them all up and everything's just kind of a mess. And I try and go through like every guitar sound in there, every keyboard sound, every percussion overdub. Does this put a smile on my face? Does this make the record more impactful, more exciting? And if it doesn't, I mute it. And every once in a while, I have some arguments with the band after I deliver the first mix about, hey, what happened to this? And the truth is, if the band goes, we loved that guitar so much, there's no way we can make the record without it. Fantastic. I'm going to rethink the record to highlight that. But a lot of times when you go in and mute a bunch of elements, many times the band doesn't even notice because they just put a bunch of stuff on there because they had the extra tracks to do it. So in production and mixing, I'm looking at that, like, does every element spark joy? But the thing where we have to take this further is keep in mind that, ask yourself, does this element spark joy? And is it worth how much it will diminish the joy in the other elements of this mix or the other elements of this production? So for instance, you could say, hey, we're going to add a Hammond B3. We've got a great, fantastic, well-maintained Hammond B3. We're going to put it on this record. We put it up, you push up the faders, and oh my God, that's such a beautiful sound. And you go, yes, 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 everybody loves it. It sparks joy in everybody in the room. But the question you have to ask is, many times if you have a dense mix already and you put a B3 into there, it's actually going to disconnect you a little bit from the guitar part. It's going to disconnect the detail around the snare drum. It's going to start smearing articulation and other things. So that element sparks joy, but you always need to keep in mind, is it worth how much it might diminish the joy of the other instruments? Because after a certain point that we get to pretty darn quickly, every time we add a new element into a mix, we actually are starting to compromise the sound and the emotional connection of everything else in there in the mix. So you have to ask yourself, does this element spark joy? Do we keep it or not? And does the joy this element brings, is it worth the trade-off of what it's going to do to the other things that maybe bring us joy? And sometimes you have to make decisions about, do we keep both, yes or no? Or do we throw one away? Or do we do what Radiohead is so brilliant with, is do we keep bringing in different elements that spark joy? And when a new element that's super cool comes in, they almost always take away something else really cool. So you constantly have these amazing, great Radiohead records, these incredible productions with all these cool sounds, but it's very rare that they have a bunch of things competing with each other. Speaking of all the clothes and stuff you should throw away, but never this one. I'm sure you've been admiring this beautiful shirt. I'll talk more about it later, but I've just done a soft launch of a new business, which is Recording Bootcamp Apparel, which is the cool place for swag, t-shirts and the like for recording geeks. Mostly t-shirts and stuff that only recording geeks would think are cool or even care about or get the jokes. So if you go to shop.recordingbootcamp.com, we've got about 50 different designs up there, and try and keep them as affordable as possible. And you will look super cool only to other geeks. Regular people won't think it's cool. And the last part, again, from the title, the life-changing magic of tidying up. Obviously, I'm not great at that in the studio, but in productions and mixing, when a mix comes to me, one of the first things I'm doing is going and tidying it up. So I'm arranging my tracks in everything. I'm seeing what I can mute or hide, but I'm always arranging my tracks in a specific sequence. Mixes and references go here, vocals, background vocals, keys, guitars, bass, drums, percussion. It's always the same for me. And so things are always in the same place, so that when I'm working, especially when I have something that's really big and dense, I can actually focus more on just being creative, being intuitive, rather than going and having to scroll through, where the heck is that guitar? Well, I kind of know, because these kind of guitars are going to go together, solos are going to be separated out this way. So the more you can tidy up, as boring and not rock and roll as that sounds, the more you can actually have fun and be intuitive. That's it, Maria Kondo. And don't know if I mentioned this already, but I finally read the book, and I'm thinking of just keeping it on a shelf indefinitely, just for ironic, comedic effect. All right, I hope that's helpful, or at least a little bit entertaining, and I'll see you all soon.